Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The row over Britain's responsibility to take in child refugees from the Syrian conflict continues. The government has agreed to take in 3,000 unaccompanied minors, but says these must come from refugee camps in the region, not from those who've made it to Europe. On Monday, an amendment to the immigration bill to take 3,000 children already in Europe was defeated in the Commons by 18 votes after ministers insisted it was the wrong course.
In any response, we need to be careful not to inadvertently create a situation in which families see an advantage in sending children ahead alone and in the hands of traffickers, putting their lives at risk by attempting treacherous sea crossings to Europe. As the horrendous events in the Mediterranean last week demonstrates, that would be the worst of all outcomes. I give way.
Well, earlier we spoke to one 17-year-old who fled the conflict in Syria more than 2 years ago, gradually making his way across Europe to Calais, where he made repeated attempts to cross the Channel. After 7 months, the boy's asylum application was finally processed with the help of the Citizens UK charity, and he was allowed in legally as his brother is already here in the UK. As his asylum claim is ongoing, he asked to remain anonymous. I started by asking him about his experience of the jungle camp in Calais.
7 شهور من مصاعب يعني واليأس.
I spent 7 months in Calais. It was a desperate and difficult situation. And if I knew the situation in the camp before I left Syria, I wouldn't have come. We were threatened all of the time, threatened with death. There were lots of gangs and lots of racism from the people of Calais, and the French police were brutal. But what was encouraging me was I had a brother here in the UK, and I was adamant to get to join my brother.
But now that you're in the UK, do you think that your journey has been worth it?
تستاهل لأنه أخي هون.
It's worth it because my brother is here, and I was doing the impossible to join him and to live together.
كبلد يعني.
Britain is a good country, but the suffering wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it, all the misery and the oppression in the camp, especially with the use of tear gas and rubber bullets.
And you would not have got out if Citizens UK hadn't helped you?
يعني شعب عنده إرادة.
Despite the help I got, I was determined to get in anyway, no matter how long it would take and how much it cost. Even if I had to pay £10,000, I was determined to get in.
And where do you see your future? Which country?
في حال يعني نحن هون إن شاء الله.
If God willing, we establish ourselves in this country, we will try to be good, because many people say refugees are troublemakers.
في ناس بتضل تقول عن اللاجئين اللي
We want to prove that if refugees have a chance to live their life, they will not spoil it. We will help this country, but at the end, I will go back to Syria, and we will rebuild it again. It's just a matter of time, and it will pass.
And that was 17-year-old Bilal speaking to me earlier. Well, yesterday, Yvette Cooper, who chairs Labour's Refugee Task Force, appealed to the Prime Minister at question time to take in more migrants from Europe. She's with me now. And we're joined from his constituency in Surrey by the Conservative MP and Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Crispin Blunt. Welcome to you both. Let me start with you, Crispin Blunt. I mean, as you heard Bilal there, I hope, he was quite clear. He said the greatest moment of peril for him was not in the refugee camp in Turkey, not even in Syria. It was actually in the jungle camp in Calais, where he spent 7 months.
And it's an example of one of the perils of the journey. And we have to have a policy that makes clear that you're going to be better off by not making that journey, not putting the incentives in place for people to roll the dice literally on their life to see if they can make it. And we need to be able to give hope to people in the countries immediately around the conflict and to provide shelter and care for them there. And then if there are people to be resettled in the United Kingdom, and we've said we're going to take 23,000, then they should come from those camps.
All right. Yvette Cooper, what's your reaction to that?
I think the problem is that a lot of the children and teenagers are already in Europe, and they've arrived as about 95,000 child and teenage refugees who are just alone, nobody to care for them, already in Europe. And they are suffering, and you're seeing not just what's happening in the camp in Calais, and the French authorities should be doing an awful lot more. It's shocking, the lack of child protection that's happening there, but also in Greece and Italy, where children's homes are full. And I think we have a moral responsibility to do our bit to help some of those children.
But the treatment of child refugees that I've seen myself in Italy is pretty good on the whole, and in Germany as well. Maybe not in the Calais jungle camp, but elsewhere it is. So doesn't the government have a point that actually it's much more important to take them out of the refugee camps in the region rather than here?
I don't think it should be an either-or. Of course we should be doing our bit to help those, particularly Syrian refugees, as you've seen from the earlier report, who have fled terrible conflict and persecution and who are in the camps near there. But we should also be able to do our bit in Europe, because the problem there is we know 10,000 child refugees have just disappeared. That is mainly into the arms of trafficking gangs, smugglers. We've got children sleeping rough in Greece, over 1,000 likely to be sleeping rough in Greece tonight because the child shelters there are full. And even in Italy, you've got a lot being sucked into prostitution rings and ending up selling sex in order to get the smugglers' gangs to take them places.
Crispin Blunt, doesn't that move you? I mean, we're talking about 3,000 extra children to be taken in by the government. I mean, why quibble over these numbers when you have a historic drama of massive proportions going on in Europe?
Because it is an either-or. We can either choose to show solidarity with our European neighbours with the problem that they've got, and then inadvertently create an incentive for people to make that journey to Europe, or we can choose to give our help directly in the region to people who are really in immediate need, fleeing from the fighting in Syria. And the United Kingdom has, amongst the European countries, almost the best record. The best record in absolute terms, and almost the best record in the share of our nation's wealth that we put towards looking after those children where they really need the help.
Okay.
And that's the right place to do it.
Right. Okay. Let me turn to a related subject, Yvette Cooper. I mean, you've shown such passion and leadership on this particular issue, applauded in the House of Commons over it. How ironic, how bitter is it for you that today the Labour Party is split over the issue of anti-Semitism, when you've been working with Lord Dubs in the House of Lords, who was himself a Jewish child when he came over on the Kindertransport to this country?
That's right, and there's been huge support actually from the Kindertransport survivors.
But how bitter is that for you?
For child refugees. No, I'm going to answer your question because I think, look, I think it's awful what's happened today, and I also think that the Labour Party needs to do more than simply have suspensions of people who have been saying anti-Semitic things. We've actually got to have a much bigger action plan to deal with this in order to have, strong processes so that there is swift action, because you can never tolerate that kind of division, that kind of discrimination.
Well, isn't that the point? What about dealing with the leadership? Is Jeremy Corbyn in a position to even manage his own party, your party?
Well, I would like to see him move very fast to deal with this. I think we've had too long a delays in the cases that we had, both with Naz Shah and with Ken Livingstone. You've got to be able to act very, very quickly to root out any kind of divisiveness or any sort of racism like this. But I think we also need a bigger plan to address this much more widely. Some of the activists have been suggesting different kinds of reforms that we could do to do that. We've always been the party of equality. We must continue to be so.
Run out of time. Yvette Cooper, thank you very much. Crispin Blunt, thanks to you.